Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the most beautiful campus in America, Ole Miss. I'm working here in Oxford, Mississippi this week, and we are in our wrap up of the drive attributes from the attributes. So today, these last two kind of fun attributes called cunning and narcissism, which, most of us have been raised with those being a pejorative, that those being a negative, that those having some stigma around them. And here we are learning that, a healthy dose of these, the right amount in the right way, are actually required for optimal performance. So I got lots of stuff highlighted as always. And as always, let's hear from you guys first. What do you got?
I liked that it says leadership is not a position, it's a behavior, and you don't get to decide if you're doing it well or not.
Yeah, great opening to the next section. And that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about the rest of this week are these leadership attributes. That's what we're rolling into and how we get to be better leaders. And you've got to have this drive piece because one of the biggest parts of leadership is leading by example, actually doing the work. Matthew, I see your mic's hot.
All right. Well, I want to get into talking about the chapter on being cunning. It gave us a few examples on what that is, and I thought the main message was the old saying about not thinking, thinking outside of the box. You have that three dots by three dots, so it was 9 dots, and how do you connect them without running into the other one with one straight line, basically. And it was showing how you start the line outside of that grid, and you can actually solve that little problem that way. And that's how we need to solve all our problems, is not thinking about the limitations, the obvious limitations. What can we expand our mind on? What are we open-minded to creatively solve our problems? And that could be applied a gajillion ways in real estate. There's a bajillion problems that'll come our way, and there's infinite ways to solve them. So I really thought that was pretty awesome as far as how I was describing being cunning and being solution oriented. It really affects everything we're doing.
Yeah, and just early on, page 141 in this chapter, this description of cunning. Cunning is an ability to disregard the unspoken and often artificial rules when appropriate, to consider objectives and circumstances from unorthodox perspectives. I used a lot of this, quote, cunningness in my home inspection space when I was helping agents, because agents would give me a call and say, so and so inspector on my listing says this, and this is wrong. And I would always ask this magic question that I learned from my youngest when he was about 4 years old. Says who? Says who? Because one of the most important parts are these artificial constraints or artificial rules or artificial standards that we think are true, which 9 times out of 10 aren't. And yet we're playing in this box that we don't have to. We're playing by these rules we don't have to. And so it was great for me to go back with that, because if there was not in that inspection space a third-party governmental or manufacturer rule regarding that, if it wasn't in the codes or wasn't in the manufacturer's documentation, it's a non-issue. It's a made-up issue by some rule of thumb or some other standard that someone has. So how does that come over to real estate? How many times in a negotiation are we saying we can't do that because it's a rule of thumb? We learn to never split the difference, a negotiation model that says figure out your target and then open at 65% of that target. So imagine the math for a moment. House is on the market for 700 grand. You're looking for 600 grand. Your opening is going to be about 430. Can't tell you how many times in the last 6 months I've been playing with this, and I've had people tell me you can't do that. The other people will respond this way. They'll not respond. They'll respond negatively. You'll make them mad. And yet, depending on how you present the material, the rules don't apply. It's exactly what the author's saying. Dorothy, I see your mic's hot as well.
Yeah, because I was really struck by this chapter, especially in the choice of words. Cunning does have negative overtones. And so I thought, well, what does he mean by that? Yet I employed it, and I don't remember if I did it before I read the chapter or after I read the chapter with a client who's not budging. And so I just let him talk. And I heard all about his family in detail. And I heard all about this and all about that. We went on for an hour. And then he said, I want you to talk to my partner. And that's where it is. And he told me what his partner situation is and when to call him. And I thought, now you like me and trust me. That's how often are we told, know you, like you, trust you. And I went, I did that by being cunning, which was, I didn't say the words, tell me about yourself. And I thought, wow, that stuff works.
Think about it. Cunning very well may be just shutting your mouth. Right? Right? As an agent, that may be your best path and be a brilliant way to approach it. Who else has something from the content?
I'll say something.
Go for it, Rhonda.
I was driving to about a 45-minute appointment, so I do a lot of my listening to the book on Audible, and so I'm trying to envision the 9 dots and trying to play with that in my head, and I'm like, I got nothing while I'm driving down this snaky road, So it gets on to the next one about the candle and so I don't see the picture that they have of the little book matches. I'm picturing the little box of matches. And I heard about the tax. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, well, let's see, how's this work? And I was like, I dumped the matches out and used the little matchbox, so I kind of did it, and thinking outside the box, like dumping everything out of the box and actually using the box to make it work for me.
Which, by the way, is exactly what the author talked about with the box that held the pins. And yet, we all have this story in our head that wasn't acceptable going into it. We didn't even think about potentially using that because we were told there were pins, there was a candle, and there were matches. So we didn't consider the other pieces. For me, as I was going through this, I was thinking just setting the candle on the floor next to the wall. Because it didn't say you couldn't, it's against the wall, and then you just put one pin through it, it's attached to the wall. All kinds of ways. The curiosity about this is how well it ties to open-mindedness, which we're going to talk some more about. And instead, one of my favorite Russisms, stop telling me why not and start telling me how to. That actually would tie perfectly into this concept of cunning, because it's always focusing on, okay, what's the other way around? It's third grade learning about prepositions and what you can do to a hill. If you can't go over the hill, can we go around the hill? Can we go under the hill? Can we go through the hill? Let's do the same thing with every problem that shows up. Who else?
I have an additional comment.
You go, and then I'm going to go to Matthew. What do you got?
So you mentioned something about cunning, and what was I trying to say here? It made me think about, I was at the EXP event this past week on Thursday and Friday, and you had Gene Frederick up there, and some of my notes I took from him, a couple things we just said about tell me about yourself, and then being cunning is sometimes shutting your mouth and listening. And some things he was saying, I took a page of notes. I just wanted to bring it up to this because it's really relevant. He had this little acronym called TMAY, which we all know is tell me about yourself, right? And then BQ, which stands for be quiet, right? And then he has LI, which stands for listen intensely. So that goes back to, listening to what they need. And you can look at their disc profile to the person you're talking to, and seeing how they communicate. And our presentation is really about what they need. We can even ask them what they need, what they're looking for. If I get you blank results or help you create blank results, are you ready to move forward? And just making it all about them. I just thought that really applied with what we were saying with being cunning. I want to bring that up, just how important that is. We want to listen to them and really hear them out so we can serve them a lot better. And they're going to open up to us more and trust us more because we are listening intently without interrupting them, and we're really seeing what their needs are. And that's huge. So I just wanted to bring that up.
And Gene Frederick is kind of the godfather. His whole life has been all about being just the right amount of cunning in every conversation. And just know it's kind of worked out okay for him. Dorothy, you had something else to add?
He just said what I was going to say. The last words I said were tell me about yourself. And I was going to add the person who said that is Gene Frederick.
There you go. Great minds think alike. Ryan Van Ornum, jump into this bad boy. What do you got, brother?
So on cunning and narcissism, like the negative connotation on these, the cunning is like you're developing a strategy to kind of manipulate the situation on your behalf. So that's like the negative connotation that I take from it. However, if you're looking at it in terms of how to create the best possible opportunity for your clients, and what the negotiations are and stuff like that. I think there's a spectrum to this where it's to be able to, in my own head, I want to wrap around that, cunning is not a negative. And, narcissism, that everybody, like, if you're driving to a listing appointment, like, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, you're a freaking badass. Like you have to have a little bit of narcissism in the way that you run your business, but you can't let it consume you, is what I'm taking from these chapters.
Well, and here's one of the interesting parts, Ryan. We are doing a direct assault on a lifetime of wiring. Because you've been taught this over and over, you've bought into the story, and many of you I have witnessed playing small or breaking through that, playing big, and then holding yourself back because of afraid of being maybe appearing cunning in the definition. A big shift in this, just on the recruiting piece. Are you recruiting for you and the paltry dollars each person ultimately means to you? Or are you recruiting to pour into those others and help them have a major change in their life? How cunning would you be if someone was about to jump off a bridge that you loved and you were working to stop that from happening? By the way, no one would label you in negative cunning by figuring out a way to prevent that from happening. And it's the same thing you're doing for your clients when you are figuring out, because you know the best path. You have the background, education, experience. You do this every day. So just because you're trying to, quote, convince or educate your client on a certain path that's going to get them to their goals doesn't mean it's negative. It actually means it's positive. So we got to reframe these and rewire our brains that this cunning piece is a great tool. And the narcissism, which I'll jump into a second. The cunning piece, though, I absolutely want to get this in because this is part of the rewiring process. He always talks at the end of chapters of how you can build the attributes. So ask yourself, hard questions about the rules and boundaries involved. Are they real or merely perceived to be? If they are real, can they be ignored? And if so, what are the consequences? You doing the right thing with the right intentions to get your clients or these other agents you're looking to help to the right place where they get to have an amazing experience, an amazing life. There may be some boundaries, there may be some rules, there may be some things that you now get to analyze and see, okay, there's one particular in this room that has created this artificial boundaries because, gosh, this owner of this office has been so good to me that I can't recruit out of that office. So you're telling me that the life of those other agents doesn't matter. Want to challenge it. So what else you guys have before we jump into more narcissism?
Russ, there's also a component which I love that he brings up every time, is that there is a drug related to that we actually get when it's done correctly. There's also a drug that we get when it's done incorrectly. So we have it framed incorrectly. And like Ryan said, he's going down the road saying, I'm going to kill this listing. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to do a freaking great job. He's given himself the drug that he needs to go in there to be powerful. And when we have those drugs and they're given to us, that's a sign that what we're doing is correct. And that's why it's really, when you jump into narcissism, you got to be really careful on where you're getting those drugs from. Because if it is false, you're going to be getting a hit of dopamine or a hit of serotonin, which is not necessarily in the correct setting. So when we do it correctly, you're getting reinforced by getting a pleasure sensitive through the drugs that we're getting, and vice versa when we do it incorrectly. So it's really important. I agree with you on the reframing, because we were told that if your ego is bad, but confidence is good. But in the same situation, they could be both the same. You know what I'm saying? And so it's really difficult on where's the fine line. And I love how he does such a great job of describing it. I'm like, Ryan, I got to go back and read this again because I read it once, and he did such a wonderful job of saying, like, when you have too much narcissism. I didn't know that. I didn't know that we all had narcissistic tendencies until I read this. I'm like, holy crap, because we were always told that's all bad. Anything that's like related to narcissism is bad. Always, we've been taught that. And so now we have to not only learn it, but reframe it and then change the way we think moving forward. And I love how he said about the serotonin and the drugs that we actually get from that, which makes sense. And I thought, and we can use that to our benefit too, when we're working with our client. Like Ryan said, like when we get there, just positive affirmation to them is going to make them feel better as soon as we walk in the door, especially if we got lots of energy, you tell them really cool things about their house, whatever, they're going to instantly feel pleasure based on you sharing that information with them. So we're learning not only to reframe ourselves, but we're also learning a tool and technique to be able to give that to other people as well too.
Absolutely. And it's fun because this confidence, which is part of this narcissism, lives just under arrogance. And that's holding that space so you don't jump that line. And the other key component of this that he talked about is we don't know when we've jumped that line. We are blind to that. Narcissism is something in the context of this writing, the higher the level of narcissism, the less we're aware of it. And so he talks about his wife who helps keep him in check because there's that close, tight relationship. So also keep in mind, we get to help hold each other in check. If we see somebody moving into arrogance, it's okay to bring it up and have a conversation and at least turn their razz on to the possibility. I mean, I loved the story in here because as someone who has been married for a number of years, we've all experienced this similar thing. And remember, the author is a Navy SEAL. He's doing amazing things. His attitude and energy is off the hook. And he comes back home to a wife who's got a newborn and a 2-year-old, and she's managing that. And he's off doing the honeydew project when she calls and says, can you help me a minute? No, I got to stop what I'm doing. I got to go help her. Goes back there to help her. Can you please get the Q-tips out of the bathroom? Because she needs them for one of the kids. Sure, where are they? They're in the closet, second shelf. No, they're not. They're not here. As so many of us guys have, somehow got blindness. And she and he argue back and fight until she finally comes storming in, reaches across around him, and grabs them right from the second shelf, and then says, quote, "They're right here." And as she turned to walk away, she loudly said, "It's no wonder you guys haven't found bin Laden yet." Just awesome that, even in the writing here, that all these components of life, including our personal relationships, tie into these attributes. And just make sure you've got people around you that love you enough, like she did, even in a moment of anger, to tell you the truth and maybe give you a little humor at the same time. Ryan, then Nafritha. I saw you both. Come on.
So I will say you have to have that confidence and that, I guess, a little bit of narcissism to believe in yourself before anybody else will believe in you, especially like as I look at like being a leader of whether like I'm working into being a leader across whether it's commercial or residential sales. I want to be that leader. And I kind of see that you have to have a little bit of that narcissistic confidence in you, whether it's that you're articulating your vision across social media platforms or whatever it is to articulate to the masses, as opposed to, the one-on-one type of communication. And that to me is kind of what's kind of stuck with me. It's like, if you're articulating your value, through video, you're going to be you got to have a little bit of that swagger to you, per se. And that's what I'm kind of getting from these chapters. But you can't let it go. In my head is wrapping around like, don't be the egotistical person on the other side.
Be the confidence. That being said, Ryan Van Ornum, you said something important. Confidence does include swagger.
Yeah.
So let's up the swagger a little bit, because you said something that kind of chapped my hide. So with the cameras that are on the air, by show of hands, how many see Ryan Van Ornum as a leader? Raise your hands. Okay. So you're not attempting to be a leader, Ryan. You're not trying to be a leader. I think I had that dirty word show up. You already are. And now you're improving as a leader. You're already a leader, light years ahead of so many other people I know. And now in these times of plugging in and getting in a new environment, you are plussing your leadership skills, which is awesome. That is the next section of attributes that we're going to be rolling into. Nafritha, you were next up, my dear.
So, just listening to what Ryan said, right? One of the things that I think is very important is for us to be able to encourage ourselves. Like, I don't know how many of you guys are spiritual, but I know, like in the Bible, it talks about how different people learn to encourage themselves. Not every time you're gonna have a cheerleader, right? But if you can look yourself in the mirror, or if you can get pumped up, sometimes it's playing that song. Like, I remember being in the military, like right before we do PT or certain things. If I play a certain song, you get pumped up, right? Sometimes as a person, if you call a certain person, they can get you pumped up. But in many cases, it's just you, yourself, and well, me, myself, and I is what they say, right? So how do we learn to dig deep and encourage ourselves and actually mean it? And I feel like you don't actually show up as a thing until you actually mean it within yourself. Like, okay, I am this thing. Like Ryan being a leader. He is a leader, right? So it's like when we believe it within ourselves, I think that's when it shows up even more. And one of the things I like was that gauge that was mentioned, where he said somebody's dad said take 2 minutes, 2 minutes whenever to celebrate. If something goes great, take 2 minutes to pat yourself on the back, right? To take 2 minutes to say I am, whatever. Like, and also on the other side of the spectrum, which we probably don't always consider, if something doesn't go right, take 2 minutes and say, well, you know what? This didn't go well. Maybe next time I could do this differently, right? But limit it to a certain time frame so that way you're not even becoming arrogant, or on the other spectrum, you're not, falling into anxiety or depression. So I thought that was like a really good tip to utilize.
Awesome. And I so wish your camera is on, because we would have taken that clip and created a reel for you. That was brilliant. So let's get that camera fixed. Number 2, you and I know that I've got your back. I've heard about some challenges you have, and I'm helping with that behind the scenes. And
Thank
number
you.
3, I just want to challenge one other thing now, because up to this point, maybe you haven't always had a cheerleader, and you now do. For all of you, though, you sometimes have to be willing, as part of your pick yourself up strategy, to pick up the phone and make a call and even tell someone, you know what, I need a cheerleader right now. Because I'm looking at a room of 18 other folks that I know, if I had a need, I could pick up the phone, call Mark Adams, and he would get me laughing and excited and on fire. And I know Ryan would say, dude, you are doing an amazing job, even though you might have stepped in the poo-poo today. Every one of you. Carrie, I know I can rely on. Robert, I'm seeing all these faces, and it's the same for all of you. You're here in a room of love and connection that want to take care of you. So who wants to bring us home?
I would say, guys, how are you going to apply what these 2 chapters to who you want to be? Like, somebody that hasn't spoken today, how do you want to apply this? Because, like, to me, like, I'm still battling my own head. Like, I know I'm making really good progress, and I'm becoming the leader I know I've always meant to be. But I don't want to go on the other side and be that arrogant person that people, don't want to be around too. So it's like walking that tightrope. So who is going to apply something from these chapters?
I'm going to try to apply something from the chapters, but cutting in narcissism, I don't really have, like it says in the book, I don't have a good feeling about that. And I don't want to be those things. So it's a matter now of changing, unlearning, and relearning. And that's always a huge challenge for me and takes forever.
Well, we're going to be here to help you. There is no try. You know, you can reach out to me, to Justin, to Ryan, and to the rest of this room. And guys, know that today, Tuesday, we have a lot of things going on in our world to help